My spooky brothers and sisters, we all have some of our favorite horror movies that we feel are just some of the best horror movies of all time and are movies that are true classics in the horror genre. Then on the other hand, movies that are straight up dog shit and are not so good and are very overrated. It is your boy Tech. Come rock with us as we go over some of what I believe to be the most overrated horror movies in the horror genre. But before we do that, if you love horror and love everything about horror movies, horror content, horror gaming, this is the channel for you. So go ahead, subscribe to the kid. We're on the road to 10K subs and it would mean the world to me. So with that being said, y'all like the video, subscribe, join the spooky gang, and we'll get this thing popping. So, spooky gang, talking about overrated horror movies. There are a lot of, really overrated horror movies out there. I can't even lie to y'all. I mean, you have to think about, one, how long the horror genre has been around. And almost for every classic horror movie that there is, there's at least 2 to 3 that are just like very overrated or damn near just are really bad horror movies. Now, some of these horror movies that I'm about to list are some of the ones that I feel are definitely one of the more overrated horror movies in the genre, and it's just some of them. So not going to go out and list every single movie that I think is overrated in the genre, because it would be a long ass video if that was the case. But regardless of that, the first movie that I wanted to list, and I know that this is going to be one of the ones that is relatively controversial. Shoot, probably dang near about the whole list is going to be controversial. But the first movie that I want to talk about as being one of the most overrated horror movies in the genre is the movie Midsommar. This movie I don't like at all. I think this movie sucks. I can't even lie to you. There's nothing about this movie that is remotely compelling or really anything that remotely stands towards it being a good movie. Some of the reasons why is because despite it having a relatively unique setting, the storyline overall just still didn't really feel like it was something that was original or something that could stand on its own. It's a movie that is very reminiscent of like The Wicker Man. It's one of those movies that really relies on, creepy and unsettling imagery. And with the movie pretty much only having just that, it really lacks, real true scares. And I want to make it clear, not all horror movies have to have, real genuine scares and just has to be the scariest movie ever, because obviously we have our horror comedies and we have many other subgenres of horror that aren't necessarily geared to being the scariest thing ever. But still, even then, it's just like when you don't really have any genuine scares at all, it really makes this movie not even feel like it's actually true horror. Move on to the pacing issues. This movie is slow burn like I've never experienced in my life. And I have a confession to make on top of that. This movie was so slow burn and was so bad that when I went to watch it in the theaters, and this is something that I never do. I never walk out of a movie theater. I watch every single movie in full, whether it's good or bad, no matter how my theater experience was. I usually watch it from front to back and just let whatever I feel about the movie be what it is, pretty much. But this was the one and the only time that I have ever walked out of a movie theater. What made it even worse is I went to go see this movie for my birthday. So I was pretty excited because I was like, okay, this movie is getting all these reviews and people are thinking that it's, such a good horror movie, this, that, and the other. So I'm like, okay, it's my birthday, so let me go ahead and go and see what this movie is talking about. And it was ass. Like, it's just not, I don't know. It's just not the movie for me. I know a lot of people are going to differ with this, but it just, the unrelatable characters, they're just so hard to really connect to as an audience. This movie reeks of style over substance. It's just all imagery and just a bunch of bull, honestly. Yeah, Midsommar for sure, to me, is one of the most overrated horror movies in the genre of all time. The next movie that I feel is overrated is Hereditary. Now, with this movie, it's a little different. I'm not gonna say that this is a bad movie or it's ass or anything like that. I do see where it is some level of a good movie. It's just not one of my favorite movies. And then in comparison to how much people like this movie and the hype of this movie and how it's revered within the horror genre, that's where I really feel like it's overrated in a lot of aspects. This movie doesn't really deliver the scares or the terror or just that real genuine horror movie experience that its reputation suggests to me. This movie is also a movie that is very slow burn and builds a lot of tension. It's not slow burn and bad in a Midsommar way. So At least that's a plus, but still, it is very slow burn. And another thing that this movie does is it really does rely on shock value. We all are well aware of one of the best scenes pretty much in horror history from this movie, with the little sister in the car and then getting her head smacked clean off. Like, so many people are very aware of that scene, people that aren't even horror fans. Like, that's how impactful that scene was. So from a shock value aspect, and because that particular scene was so great, okay, that was good. But some of the other things that it does for shock value doesn't really hold up as well. And then considering you don't get a whole lot more outside of its shock value. But yeah, it's just things like that. And then, a relatively confusing third act, like this psychological family drama and family issues type of deal, to basically being like full-blown supernatural horror movie. Like, I don't know, it's like it's too much of do we want to go here or do we want to go there? Like, it wasn't really a nice blend between the two. Like I said, not shitting on the movie, because it's not a bad movie. It's just, for me, I feel like it really does have some level of being very overrated. Then the whole cult aspect of the movie just really wasn't thoroughly explained, so it just really leaves it sort of, I guess, up to interpretation of the viewer and the audience. But your boy doesn't really have an answer for you. But yeah, Hereditary is just one of those movies that I feel like is overrated, and like I said, not necessarily in a this movie is bad, but just overrated for its quote unquote stature and its hype. The next movie that I feel is overrated is The Cabin in the Woods. Now with this movie, I actually do enjoy this movie. I do like watching this movie. So in a way, this movie kinda goes more into the guilty pleasure aspect of horror, for me at least. But once again, this movie sort of goes into this overrated category, just because, first things first, with this movie, I feel like it's a little too self-aware for its own good. Like, while meta commentary on horror tropes and stuff like that can be really clever and really interesting, this movie seems like it holds on to that aspect a little too strongly, and because of that, it kind of undermines some of the other aspects of the horror movie. I feel like the characters and the character development overall wasn't really all that good. I mean, a lot of the characters were very stereotypical, just, I mean, that's sort of what the movie is supposed to be. Is, like, it's those type of characters. We've all had, the group of friends that goes to the cabins and then some stuff starts happening, but this movie just wants to be a meta self-referential version of those type of movies. But it's like some of the characters were so stereotypical that it's just like, all right, like, you're beating us over the head with it. Like, for instance, the stoner character. Like, stoner characters in a lot of movies don't be all like, yo, bro, I'm like so high. Like, I'm so, oh man, where's my weed? Where's my, like, they don't really act like that. So like, this movie, it was like, okay, it's going overboard trying to portray the fact that in horror movies, it is prevalent in having, the stoner character, and then the slutty character, and then, the guy that's trying to lead the group and he's acting like he's just this big badass. Like every single character was very stereotypical, and I feel like it was overly done in that aspect. And moving on closer to the third act, where it is CGI galore and it's not good CGI. I really like the idea of having all of these different monsters and entities down underneath this whole facility. It doesn't necessarily play that well visually on screen because the CGI is just that bad. So like the CGI snake, and then pterodactyls and bats, and people that look like Pinhead, and that they sort of just cheaped out on it and then just used CGI to sort of fill in the blank, because there was no way that they were going to use practical effects for every single one of those things that they brought out of this little horror museum that's underneath the house. Like, I just I don't know, like, I just feel like the CGI just really wasn't that good. And then one thing that really plagues the movie as overall is sort of that lack of true suspense. We pretty much know from about the very get-go that everything that these group of people that went to the cabin are experiencing is due to manipulation. Like, this whole thing was set up, and all the zombies that they encounter, Chris Hemsworth jumping off the dirt bike and hitting that little wall. We already knew what was going to happen, because as they were approaching the cabin, we saw like a bird or some shit hit that and then end up falling down it. So it's like there was so many little things that we kind of already knew that I kind of wish we didn't know leading up to it. Now, like I said, I do like this movie, so it's not gonna stop me from watching it, but it genuinely is an overrated movie in comparison to how highly it's rated. Like, you look at pretty much any rating platform, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, whatever, it's rated relatively high. So all of those things, that culmination of things, just makes this for a pretty overrated movie, unfortunately. The next movie that I feel is overrated is The Grudge. When it comes to The Grudge in Japanese horror, there's usually two sides of the coin. There are the people that are fans of The Grudge, and then there are the people that are fans of The Ring. I personally, clearly at this point, am one of those fans of The Ring, and I just have never been able to really resonate with The Grudge really at all. From the fact that it has just like an over reliance on jump scares. Like, there's no type of tension building. It's just repetitive jump scares pretty much over and over and over. The storytelling and, storyline is a little confusing because it's a timeline being sort of fragmented. Like, you can't really, it's kind of hard to put the pieces together to really understand what's going on in the story as a whole. Most of the characters that we experience in the movie are really just written in there to be knocked off. And like I say, in some of our favorite horror movies, especially our slashers, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it genuinely is very important that you are able to relate to your characters, or at least half of them. So when people do get knocked off, it's actually impactful. It's like, dang, you didn't want them to get knocked off. You really liked them. You really enjoyed what they brought to the movie and their, charisma or whatever it is. And their acting prowess, things of that nature. All that stuff is really important, and I just don't feel like you get that in this movie, whereas The Ring is one of those ones that did it significantly better than The Grudge did. And so yeah, that's just sort of how I feel about The Grudge. I ain't even gonna lie to you. And the last movie that I wanted to talk about as far as being overrated, and it also is another movie that I actually do like, and that is Paranormal Activity, the original from 2007. This movie sort of falls under a weird category for me. It is a good movie, and it did spawn some pretty good sequels and some other horror movies that I think are really good in the found footage subgenre of horror. This movie to me just doesn't age that well. Like, Paranormal Activity 2 and 3 I think still age relatively well, but this particular one, I don't know, just something about it just still doesn't hit. I feel like in this movie there is more of a over reliance of that found footage and those static camera shots and all that good stuff, but there's so much of things that are not happening in this movie. For 2007 and everything that it did as far as feeling somewhat fresh and new, we hadn't really had a banger found footage horror movie since The Blair Witch, almost, leading up to 2007 with Paranormal Activity. And you hear all the reviews of like how grown men were going into the movie and were like petrified of this movie and all of this good stuff. So yeah, for the time, I think that it was pretty impactful, but just as we kept going on, and then you rewatch this movie multiple times, you just really start to notice how really not a damn thing happens in this movie almost the whole time. It's really slow paced. We really don't care for Katie or Mika or Micah or whatever she calls him, Mika, but it looked like Micah to me. Nobody really cares for them as much. They're pretty underdeveloped, especially in this one. Upon rewatch, it just doesn't really do it. I like the movie. Whenever I watch the franchise, here and there I will start with it, but sometimes I will just jump to 2, or I might watch the Mark ones or something like that. But yeah, for this first one, it just didn't really age that well to me. But that is all I got, Spooky Gang. Y'all comment down below, what do you think are some of the most overrated horror movies in the genre? There's plenty of them out there, so I can't wait to see what y'all say as far as your answers. But yeah, y'all comment those down below. Anybody that's new to the channel, y'all subscribe to the channel and join the Spooky Gang. We're on the road to 10K subs. Every single week I'm putting out bangers. Y'all can always expect that. So I appreciate all y'all, Spooky Gang. I appreciate the love and support as always. Until next time, Spooky Gang, y'all stay blessed and y'all stay spooky.